have 4 thrilling games on tap for this weekend, and we're going to break them down for NFL DFS, let you know who you should target on both the Saturday and Sunday only slates, and also just get you ready for what should be a fantastic week of football, and it can't be much worse than what happened last week in DFS. Let's dive on in and get you set for the divisional round of the 2020 playoffs. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network at numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sonis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gdula. He is the managing editor for numberFire.com. Brandon, there's no Corey Davis in this slate. I can go back to John Brown. There's no Anthony Miller on this slate. There's a Ronald Jones dilemma, but at least some of the demons that haunted me last week are no longer here. So I'm feeling a weight lifted. How are you doing?
Last week was rough for I think you and I both. Way too many zeros in an NFL lineup, which is not. It's kind of hard to do, especially whenever we're dealing with good offenses, but it's going to be an enjoyable weekend of football. I do think, and I'm just an internal pessimist, I do think that at least 3 of the games have a very clear path to being bad for daily fantasy purposes. I talked to you. I don't know if the 10-point spread was worrying other people. I think the Chiefs game is easily the best game of the week. But looking at these other games, it's this game could be a grinder. This could be, tough for full-fledged fantasy potential. So I think it's going to be an interesting one to navigate.
I think the plus thing here is we've gotten rid of some of the good defenses that were on last week's slate, like Pittsburgh, Chicago. They're gone. We've added in the 2 best offenses in football, depending on where you rank Buffalo. But if you look at the full season offensive efficiency numbers based on or adjusted for schedule at numberFire, 7 of the top 10 offenses for the regular season are in play this weekend, and the Rams are lingering. But that means that we're going to have good offenses here. And I think that, to me, what that says is I need to focus on upside again. Last week, I think with the way things played out, I don't think this was the case going in, but with the way things played out, you could have justified focusing on floor a bit more than usual for last week because the scores were so low. I don't think we'll see a replication of that this week. I think we're going to see high scores, which should shift our focus back towards upside versus floor. It never should have been a floor focus because, again, I think we overemphasized floor to begin with. But I think that for this week specifically, you're going to need big point totals, despite the fact it's just 2 and 4 game slates. Are you getting a similar read, or do the paths to failure make you a bit more pessimistic about the point totals this weekend?
I am a little bit pessimistic about point totals, but I think especially on a smaller slate, ceiling is important because there comes an opportunity cost where if one of the quarterbacks, and we do have quarterbacks with obvious upside, let's say you're just for simplicity, you're playing the 4-game slate and Mahomes goes off and, Josh Allen, Lamar, kind of that game, there's just too many run plays, then they don't really erupt. You can't make up for what Mahomes if he puts up 35. And so you can't get away with playing Drew Brees for the floor and he gets you 20 and Mahomes gets you 15 unless you hit everywhere else. But I think that ceiling should win out in just about every lineup this week.
And that should be the case always. But I think it's worth emphasizing it this week because it is a 4-game slate. I think that there is an inclination to gun for floor. And this is something that I did in the past on smaller slates was I would put a higher emphasis on floor because you didn't need as many points. I think this week is different just because there are so many good offenses. And I think these games should be competitive enough to be interesting for sure. Before we dive into the games, we're going to go game by game here, focusing mainly on the Saturday and Sunday only slates, but we'll sprinkle in some talk about the 4-game slate. Before we start things off with the Rams at Packers, quick reminder, we will be back here again on Friday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern, doing our playoff Q&A with myself, Brandon, and JJ Zacharyson, breaking down each game, talking about our favorite bets in those, 1-0. Here so far on our betting competition from this past week. So got to run that to 2-0. If it's like the snake draft and I start off 3-0, that's okay because there are not 15 weeks this time. So I can't blow that lead this time. But Back with you Friday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern. You can chime in, ask us questions about DFS, betting, just the games in general, whatever it may be. That's on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Periscope pages. Make sure you are subscribed there on your platform of choice. Get those questions in 3:30 p.m. Eastern tomorrow, Friday, right here on the same place. Also, if you're listening to this after the Saturday slate locks, I will put a timestamp in the description up on numberFire.com to let you know when the Sunday only slate begins. I forgot to do that last week. I said I'd do that during the podcast, and I forgot. So sorry. I put it on the numberFire post, but not in the episode description. So I'll try to do that this week and not let you down.
You actually said you were going to do it like before we even got there, which I thought was very impressive.
I thought I had more faith in future Jim than I should have, basically. And given the way that Corey Davis, John Brown, Ronald Jones did, not surprising. Let's dive in here and start things off with the Rams at the Packers. Packers 6.5-point favorites. Total is 45.5. Now, the interesting thing with this game is that although 86% of the money at FanDuel Sportsbook is on the Packers, it came off of Rams +7. It's now +6.5. And I think that's an impactful move. 76% of the money is on the over here, but that did go down a point. So some reverse line movement in both situations in favor of the Rams and in favor of the under here. As far as injuries go, Jared Goff looks like he will start for the Rams. He practiced in full on Tuesday and Wednesday. John Wolford was sidelined. Goff's going to start. Aaron Donald did not practice, but Sean McVay has said that he expects Donald to be a full go. So we'll learn more about that Thursday, but it sounds like Donald should be good. Cooper Kupp missed both days as well. He is labeled as day-to-day, but seems to be more in doubt than Donald. So I'm assuming that Jared Goff starts. I'm assuming that Aaron Donald plays. Cooper Kupp, probably 75% to go, but the 25% is very noteworthy. Brandon, injury questions around the Rams. We don't know about Jared Goff's effectiveness coming off of thumb surgery. The Packers coming off a bye, but they also have their injury concerns because they lost David Bakhtiari, and then they signed Jared Valdir to play after he played last week in the playoffs as well for a different team, but now he's on the COVID list. So injury questions on both sides. What are you seeing in this game?
So the path for this one to go poorly is that the Rams are just an amazing defense. And Green Bay is very slow. They've been very slow for most of the season. They've been very slow recently. They can get away with it because they're so efficient. And I think another concern is just the Rams quarterback play. Last week we saw Jared Goff, have actually the thing I thought Goff would not do is throw it downfield, but his his average depth of target was 10.9 yards downfield. The efficiency though wasn't very good, negative 0.06. Passing net expected points per drop back, the NFL average this season has been a positive 0.13. If you adjust that for the fact that he played Seattle, he was like negative 0.18. Like he should have been a lot better. So I think that there still are concerns with how this team moves the ball. And obviously on the other side of that, for the Packers, they face the best adjusted defense in football. Both actually, I think, passing and rushing, if I'm not mistaken.
I think they were second rushing, if I recall correctly. But regardless, actually I have that. No, I don't have it here. I lied.
No, I have them first. Yeah.
Okay, well, I lied. Either way, I think the big question for me around this game is not will Jared Goff be effective? I don't think he'll be effective. I think based on what we saw last week, saying he'll be effective is a reach. However, the question is, will he be effective enough to prop up Cam Akers? Because I think that Cam Akers is the rock star here. He leads the weekend, meaning all running backs, whether it be the Saturday or the Sunday slate. He leads all running backs in adjusted opportunities per game, which is carries plus 2x targets, because a carry is worth twice as much as a target on FanDuel. 28 adjusted opportunities per game for Cam Akers, 122.4 yards from scrimmage per game in his most relevant sample, and he has a 50% red zone share. So half of the team's carries or targets inside the 20, and Green Bay ranks 21st against the rush. They actively do not care about stopping the rush. They did sign Damon Harrison after he was cut by the Seahawks. I think it was before week 17. I think that's actually a pretty noteworthy signing for them, because in the past they couldn't stop the run. They've always chosen not to, but against the 49ers last year, they couldn't. They just flat out could not. I think that if we get a similar situation this week, they could be in some trouble where Cam Akers moved the ball against them, and that could be an issue. But with Damon Harrison signing, they've had a full offseason to try to get that rush defense better. It's a question of, can they stop the run? My inclination right now is to think that they probably will not be able to slow down Cam Akers too much. So I think that Cam Akers, despite pessimism around the Rams offense, is a priority once again at 7,000. I think that he is number one running back on the slate for me. Aaron Jones, obviously in that discussion. Devin Singletary could be a value play. We have J.K. Dobbins as well, but I think that Akers is number one. And I think the Rams will be effective enough to make him be viable. What are your thoughts on Cam Akers?
Yeah, I have him number one for the Saturday slate. Pretty easily, I kind of tiered this one out. He's in his own tier for me. We've just seen such a good role from him. Good snap rates. Good enough red zone role for sure, as you were talking about. And I think that there are concerns, yes, about the Rams offense, but they're going to try to flow through him, especially if Jared Goff is not, at full capacity. And this is one of those spots where this team might try to run the ball more to keep the other team off the field. I always factor that in a little bit. I don't know if they're particularly going to be successful with that, but as you said, there are reasons to believe that they can. And I think that Cam Akers, just with his workload, I don't really know how you can argue that anyone else would be the RB1 on this slate.
I think the path to failure for him is if they get down 14-0 right away, which can happen. Like, that's within the range of outcomes. But I think the way you handle Cam Akers' exposures, you ask yourself, what are the odds that happens? What are the odds they get totally wiped from the get-go? Because if they're in it for a half, I think he'll get enough in that half to justify inclusion in lineups. But they could not be in it at halftime. So ask yourself, what are the odds they get totally annihilated, and omit Akers from that percentage of lineups effectively? But I think everywhere else, he's kind of basically a must play. The rest of the Rams, tough because we know the Packers really good cornerback play. We know that Goff is not going to be effective in this game. We know that they're probably not going to throw that much. Robert Woods is $6,600. That's fair. I think it's a fair salary. Tyler Higbee's 52. I think that with the way the Packers defense is constructed, he could wind up being viable. He's had his snap rate go back up in weeks 13 to 16 and then week 18. So basically, since in games they've had Cup, since we saw Josh Reynolds' snap rate go down, Higbee's at 17% of the deep targets and 20% in the red zone, 14% overall. I think that's enough. So Akers is the only priority. I think that Woods and Higbee considerations, but neither guy is someone I am really rushing to use. That's under the assumption that Cup goes. If Cup does not go, maybe you can justify Josh Reynolds, but it'd still be pretty tough for me. It would bump up Higbee a bit, but it would also bump down Akers because I think the odds that the Rams get wiped in that scenario are higher.
Yeah, I feel like that skepticism kind of applies to a lot of teams this week, but I think specifically the Rams with their pass catchers. I think Reynolds is maybe a little more interesting than you do. He didn't get a target, but he ran 20 routes, which was 69% of them, same as Tyler Higbee last week. If you remove Kupp, I think that there's at least a case where Josh Reynolds at 5,200 is just kind of one of those guys who scores a touchdown, is decent. And yes, we want ceiling, but it is really hard to build a lineup with ceiling at every single position. And if the difference is a Josh Reynolds to get to Mahomes versus one of these lower end quarterbacks, I think that is viable because there is a path to somewhat of a ceiling for Josh Reynolds, especially if you play it from the angle that the Packers get out ahead. And I think you can rank these guys out. You can look at median value. I think median value is much less relevant on a smaller slate than it is even on a bigger slate because that's not how football works. It's not how fantasy points are accumulated. So I think in every single lineup, you got to do the GM game and make those assumptions and see how things play out. So if you think that the Packers get out ahead, Josh Reynolds without Cooper Kupp would have some good low end appeal for me.
I think that's the right way to phrase it. Where again, it's kind of the Adrian Peterson scenario where the path to upside may not be super clear, but there is a path with Josh Reynolds. And like you said, at $5,200, you can value floor more there than other positions. And like he could be in the perfect lineup without a huge total at that number. As far as the Packers go, the only disagreement that I have with what you said about Akers is I think that Aaron Jones is in the same tier as Akers. I think that Akers, I feel very firm in putting him first. But I do think that Aaron Jones is in that same tier. The primary reason is that last year in the playoffs, we saw the Packers commit to Aaron Jones. He had an 84% snap rate in their first game, 65% in the second, but that's because they were down huge early. That's probably not going to happen here. He played 70% of the snaps in Week 17 when they were trying really hard to win. That was tied for his second highest in a game that he's played with Jamal Williams this year. The Rams are very good against the rush, but I think the Packers should be able to move the ball here, especially if Donald is not necessarily at full health. So that's the lone disagreement I have with what you said, is I think that Jones and Akers are in the same tier. I do favor Akers by a decent amount, but I think that Jones is in that same tier under the possibility he gets that playoff snap rate bump. What are your thoughts on the Packers offense in general here?
I have Jones in his own tier, second. I think that's a pretty easy case to make. Running backs pretty rough on this slate overall. I think it's obviously Jones and Akers if you can build around them. But we have seen his workload, I know, improve in the playoffs last year. But just with Devontae healthy, we've seen him not be necessarily the Aaron Jones without Devontae. The offense flows through Devontae Adams. And so that's what kind of gets me off of Jones as someone in the same tier as Cam Akers. I think for Jones to erupt, it's more of the Packers are just moving the ball at will, and he's getting some really high leverage work in the red zone, which is very much possible. But again, it's not like I dislike Jones for this week. Overall for the Packers, though, I think that Aaron Rodgers is in like not the best situation. He's not someone to ignore. This is not an offense to ignore or worry about the matchup, but I don't think that it's the right spot to target him actively. He's faced just one top 10 adjusted pass defense since Week 11 when Allen Lazard came back, which is kind of a key sample for me to look at with the Packers. He's been very good all season, but again, hasn't really faced too many tough defenses, and so that is something that I factor in. Of course, relative to expectation, he's been very good. But I think that there are reasons to be a little bit hesitant to go all in on the Packers. And the other issue is we know the Packers are very concentrated for the most part. So it's Rodgers, Jones, and Devontae. So there's not a whole lot of value places to look and get exposure to. So unless you're confident that Devontae goes off in a very tough matchup, I don't really know what to love here outside of maybe Aaron Jones.
Yeah, Rodgers is $400 more than Lamar Jackson, which I think is terrible. It'd be tough to justify going hard at Rodgers to begin with, but once you factor in, you get a $400 discount to use a guy who's averaging 94 rushing yards per game since he came back from COVID. Also, I just like that game so much more than this one. So I think that I like both AFC games a lot more than both NFC games personally. Yeah. And that's why I think this game is about the running backs. The other game is about the quarterbacks and pass catchers pretty easily. Now, Devontae's facing Jalen Ramsey. That's obviously a tough matchup. That does not mean you avoid Davante Adams. I need to make that abundantly clear. Devontae, throughout his career, has shredded good cornerbacks. He didn't have to face that many in 2020, but like if you look at him historically, it doesn't matter who he's facing. Davante Adams is tremendous. What it does do is I think it lowers me on the Packers offense because you're going to take Davante Adams, the projected efficiency targeting Davante Adams, lower that a bit. And they're just not as good when they're not going to Davante Adams. So I think that's why another reason why I'm lower on Rodgers is that I just don't think that the passing offense is built to combat a team like the Rams because they're so dependent on one specific guy. I think that because Davante may lose one or two targets relative to where he's usually at. Again, don't avoid him as a result of that. But like that does increase the appeal in Allen Lazard and Robert Tonyan. Tonyan, since Allen Lazard's return, 14% of the overall targets, 17% deep, and 22% in the red zone. And he's been really good in that volume too. Like he's been tremendous on a per target basis, the best tight end in football on a per target basis. He just doesn't get a lot of targets, but $6,200, he's kind of close to Mark Andrews. That makes it a little bit tougher. So I agree. Like there's no one who stands out as being a priority. I think that Lazard, Tunyon, maybe MVS are considerations. MVS is either going to get 15 or 0. Like that's a guarantee. But like I think they're all considerations, but no one outside of Jones and Akers in this game as a whole is a priority to me.
Yeah, I would say that that's the case. Now, I try to hold off on like building lineups for as long as I can, just so that I can get the most information and I'm not drawn in by how to build lineups. But with the quote unquote value at running back, with the salaries just being what they are, with Lamar at 8,000, it's really not that hard to get to Devontae. You can make it work. And I don't want to speak for you, but this is definitely on 2-game slates. I'm not locked into playing a running back at the flex. So that does give me some more, flexibility to build my lineup. So I can get to Devontae a lot. I think the question really becomes then, how much Devontae's too much? And can you lock him? Like, are you going to lock him into, let's say, 20, 25 lineups? Or are you going to try to play it that he's a little more popular than he deserves to be given the matchup?
I don't know if he'll be more popular than he deserves to be, just because I think people are very aware of the Rams. But I think I'm not going to lock him in just because I like the other game so much more. Mm-hmm. Like, straight up, I prefer Devontae over Stephon Diggs. But once you consider game environment, I prefer Stephon Diggs. I would rank Diggs higher than Devontae personally. And it's not about matchup. I don't care about that. I care about game environment, and I think the game environment for Bills Ravens is infinitely better than this one. So to me, that's why I would struggle to lock Devontae into every lineup, just because I think the game environment discrepancy is big enough where I can be lower on him relative to where I'd usually be.
Yeah, I mean, it's just fascinating because of the way that the salaries work. And I mean, there aren't any running backs who deserve to be 9,000 like Devontae. So right. That I think it's definitely justifiable where his salary is and where the running backs are. But, you can play a lot of Devontae and, you have to have some value receivers. But aside from Diggs, I mean, we have Woods at 66. So I'm definitely not saying you can just play whoever you want on this slate. But you can, I would think Devontae is going to be extraordinarily popular. And as much as I think we both like him, I might be okay pivoting away from him and hoping that he just is just fine. Okay. And yeah.
Like, again, don't avoid Devontae Adams, but yes. I think if you were prioritizing guys, I'd prioritize Diggs over Devontae because of game environment. That's the way I wind up here. Okay, let's say you do decide to stack this game to get contrarian. How are you stacking it? What's your one game stack from this game?
I would probably go with a Packers onslaught with Rodgers, Devontae, Jones. I might even throw in like an MVS there, and then bring it back with Woods, and maybe skip out on Cam Akers and say that like they just get the doors blown off them.
Okay,
because you guys how to be contrarian.
So delete this audio.
Jared Goff, here it comes.
I'd consider it. So he's 67. Rodgers is 84. You can kind of like if you want Devontae and Diggs. So I think that a Goff, Akers, Woods, Devontae, Jones lineup could be kind of fun. I will have a non-zero number of lineups with that because I can do it if I go Goff. You're going to see a lot of splits this week about Jared Goff's numbers in temperatures under 40 degrees.
2 games.
2 of those 6 games. People have said 5 games. That's because they're looking at just the regular season. He was in weather under 40 degrees last week. So make sure you look at playoffs as well. 2 of those games were as a rookie. In 2017 against Tennessee, he went for 301 yards and 4 tutties. So, he's a different quarterback than he was now in a bad way. Like, you should not factor that 2017 game in, but also you should not factor in 2016. I think they're pretty bad splits. Like, just throwing that out there. I think there are 4 relevant games. He was very good in one. He was bad in the other 3, but like, just be wary. I don't think the Rams offense will bottom out, is what I'm saying. And I think that's why I feel good about Cam Akers.
All I will say about Goff is I think he's a prime example of how you're like a floor. Like, every quarterback pretty much has some floor of fantasy points just based on how they accumulate their fantasy points. Does Goff have a ceiling that can match Josh Allen or Lamar? And yes, some of the time he will. Right. But is that how you're going to – and if you're going to play Jared Goff, I think you have to assume that the Bills and
Correct.
Ravens game is –
If I stack this game, I am making that assumption because I am not going to stack this game unless I make that assumption.
Gotcha. So, maybe you stack up your favorite play. Well, I mean, the salaries just don't really require it. Like, Mark Andrews is 66, so I don't even want to go down that path, I guess. So I would just say, yes, if Goff is, he gets you like 20 and it gets you exposure to Diggs, Devontae, Aaron Jones, and those guys all go off, that makes sense. But if you're not getting 25 from Devontae, you're going to have a hard time with Jared Goff matching, Lamar.
The only situation I see myself using a quarterback in this game, and that means Goff or Rodgers, is if I assume the second game is a dud. My baseline assumption is that ain't going to happen. So let's move now to the Baltimore Ravens at the Buffalo Bills. This game is much better between these two, which is why, like, if you gave me 10 lineups, I would not use a quarterback not in this game. I would not consider it. I think you just build around these two guys. Bills 2.5-point favorites. Total is 50. 79% of the money is on the over here. It's been bouncing back and forth between 50 and 50.5. Not sure what to read into that, but noteworthy. Marcus Peters missed practice Tuesday and Wednesday with a back injury. His status is not known for Saturday. Also, Zach Moss will not play for the Bills. So let's start things off. There, Brandon. Devin Singletary, $5,700. His upside sucks. I think it's terrible. However, the realistic range of outcomes on Devin Singletary at $5,700 is better than the realistic range of outcomes for any wide receiver at 57. As a result of that, I think that I will wind up having Akers, Jones, and Singletary in a hefty number of my lineups on Saturday. It is not because I think that Singletary has upside. I think that he has a better range of outcomes than the low-salaried wide receivers. So that's my analysis on Devin Singletary. What about you?
Yeah, he's tough because the salary is what it is, and it opens up pretty much everything. We're talking about ceiling a lot. We're talking about floor. I agree with you where his floor is higher than let's see. We have Cole Beasley at 5,900, John Brown 55, Marquez Valdez-Scantling 55, Gabriel Davis 54. If you compare him to your other flex options, the floor is going to be higher, but if you look at Devin Singletary, and I know he's going to get more work without Zach Moss, but I would imagine even if you combine their production, it's like not that amazing just because of how little,
we actually have a 3-game sample here of Singletary without Moss. He's at 22 adjusted opportunities per game, 77 yards per game, and 22% red zone share. He's hideously inefficient. But like that workload on a small slate can lead to production. Looking back at those games, it was weeks 3, 4, and 5, 14.1 points against the Rams, 16.2 against the Raiders, 3.8 against Tennessee in a game where they just got throttled. So I think that Singletary I think that you compare him to Jones and Akers. Like, if that's your question, you go Jones and Akers by a mile. If you compare him to the 5,000 wide receivers, I think that his range of outcomes, including the ceiling, is better than Cole Beasley. I think the range of outcomes, including the ceiling, is better than John Brown. I think the range of outcomes compared to Marquez Valdez-Scantling, I think that MVS's ceiling is like his 90th percentile outcome is a little bit better, but like the gap in the 75th percentile outcome is big enough where I'd rather just go Singletary.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not here to argue against Devin Singletary at a salary of $5,700. I'm just here to play like some devil's advocate and say, we've seen Devin Singletary enough to know that he's probably not going to bust the slate open unless the Bills are just moving the ball at will and he gets a lot of red zone work, or they fall behind. Maybe he gets a lot of targets, which are more efficient than carries. So, I mean, look, like, again, I'm not going to fault anyone. I'm going to use a lot of Singletary myself, but I think it's fair to ask the question, if he gets you 8 FanDuel points, are you going to be surprised?
No. If
he's going to be
0 points, would you be surprised?
What's that?
If MVS gets you 0 points, would you be surprised?
No, I wouldn't. That's. But if Marquez Valdes-Scantling outscores Singletary, we're also not going to be surprised. And I would imagine Singletary is going to be the most popular play of the slate. Or
according to Roto-Grinders, I don't want to give away their stuff because they do awesome stuff and it's paywalled. According to Roto-Grinders popularity projections, that is not the case.
Wow.
I'm surprised by it too.
So, okay. Just like the way that my mind works with Singletary is, if he gets you 16, you're going to basically need him. If he gets you 8, you can probably do without him.
I think that he's easier to avoid on the full slate. Like if you go the 4-game slate, I think that my move is being either overweight or even with the field with him for the Saturday slate and being significantly underweight with the Saturdays through Sunday slate. Because if you look at the receivers on the Sunday slate in the 5,000 range, that gets me Rashard Higgins. Like maybe you can chase Mecole Hardman or something like that. Emmanuel Sanders is there.
What is the difference between Mecole Hardman and Marquez Valdes-Scantling if you're talking like ranges of outcomes?
There isn't one. I mean, MVS probably has a higher ceiling, but like you have more choices is what I'm saying.
Sure.
So.
No, I get you.
Also, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is $6,100. I'd rather have CEH than Singletary, personally. I think that CEH has a lot of flaws as well, but I think his ceiling is better than Singletary's. So I think
the real argument with Singletary is Singletary or Dobbins.
I think Singletary.
I might be okay with Dobbins, especially if he's going to be a little more.
Pitch me on that. Go ahead. I think it's a fair argument. I think they're in the same tier, so pitch me on it.
When we're talking about a 2-game slate, we can talk all the numbers we want, all the market shares we want. At a certain point, it comes down to game theory. And if J.K. Dobbins scores 2 touchdowns, which is very possible, and Devin Singletary is Devin Singletary, you can get a huge leg up. So, I always struggle with the playoff pods in preparation because I just step back and I do ranges of outcomes a lot. And just knowing how things work, I'm fine missing out on Devin Singletary's 15-point game in the effort to match it with I don't know if Gus Edwards would get there, but I'm fine making less optimal decisions to try to gain an advantage in a tournament on a 2-game slate.
I think that you mentioned the guy who might be the better way to do that, which is Gus Edwards at $5,300 because their workload is the same. If you look at the Ravens running backs in the games since their bye weeks, that's 6-game sample. Mark Ingram has been a non-factor in that time. Adjusted opportunities are 12.8 for Dobbins, 11.7 for Edwards. Yards from scrimmage, 79.8 for Dobbins, 77.0 for Gus. Dobbins does get more red zone work, but Gus can obviously score as well. And you look back to last week, which was, I think, their most relevant sample because, again, they're trying to win. 51% snap rate for Dobbins, 45% for Gus. Dobbins had 1 additional carry and 1 additional target. I think that Gus Edwards is a viable play at $5,300 if you want to get away from the other backs. I think that's partly because I think people are going to be way higher on Dobbins than they should be. I know in general, I have been, when I look back at roster rates and stuff like that, I have often been shocked to see the numbers on J.K. Dobbins, just because I think that his path to his ceiling is pretty obscure outside of week 17. So I think that I plan to be underweight on Dobbins, and I will have a non-zero number of Edwards lineups in order to try to leverage against Singletary, but also leverage against Dobbins.
Yeah, that's my argument. Yeah. It's not.
I'd just rather use Edwards to do so than Dobbins, personally.
Sure, but like my argument against Singletary is not workload related. It's worth 60 yards. Like if he does not score a touchdown and Gus scores one, possibly two, we've seen him involved near the goal line. Like that's where I'm coming from. And I mentioned before, like, yes, median value is going to show Singletary is a better play than Gus Edwards. But if you're playing a huge tournament, I think it's worth considering not playing Singletary in all of your lineups and pivoting.
No, I 100% agree. I refuse to play him in every lineup.
But I think if I ask my brother if he's going to play a lot of Singletary, he's probably going to play a lot of Singletary. I'm trying to approach it from like we want to make some. If you're playing against like three people, it's like three buddies, play Singletary. But if you're trying to like take down a large tournament, median value.
So what are you saying from an exposure perspective
for Singletary?
For Singletary,
probably like 40.
Okay, so we're actually on the same page. We're arguing about nothing. I agree. I think that's fine.
Again, but I think we're lower on Singletary than most people will be.
I agree, 100%.
That's what I'm not arguing against you. I'm arguing against.
Oh, okay.
Consensus.
Fine. Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Okay.
I also did run Sharp Stack over on numberFire. Devin Singletary is going to be in a lot of those.
Yeah.
So
and yes,
I think that I'm okay being underweight on him if I wind up there. I am not going to actively try to fade him, though. I'm going to build the lineups I think are good because I know for a fact I will be aggressively overweight on Akers and Jones. Like they could be 70% rostered. I will be overweight on them. I think I had 95% Akers last week. Like that's, I know that I am going to be different elsewhere. I am okay being in line with the chalk elsewhere.
And optimizers love value at running back.
They were all over Antonio Gibson last week. I was so confused. They were all about James Conner. So like, you know, I think I'm okay being underweight. I'm just saying I'm not going to actively try to be underweight on him. I'm just going to build my lineups disregarding what his popularity is because I know that I'll be different elsewhere.
Yes, and it's very easy to get locked into Singletary.
Yes. But,
you know, just it's Devin Singletary still.
Exactly. Okay, so we are going to be lower than consensus on Singletary. I think that's fair. What else do you see in this game? I think that, so like if I'm ranking
other stuff in this game?
Yeah, I know, right? If I'm ranking the games for the 4-game slate, it's Chiefs Browns, and then it's this one number 2 above Bucks Saints. I don't think we need to just like Rams Packers is very easily 4th. I think this one's easily 2nd though. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay.
I went out. I ranked games. This game could be in consideration for number 1 over Kansas City and Cleveland, just because, you know, I think there are a lot more reasons to be worried about Cleveland's offense than either of these two offenses. The way that this one goes wrong is that they're both run-heavy teams. It's possible that Baltimore, with such a good, you know, adjusted pass defense, causes problems for Josh Allen, but Allen's been pretty phenomenal against good adjusted, you know, pass defenses. 302 yards per game against top 12 opponents in 9 games. He's played so many good defenses, and he's been very good in them. His passing net expected points per dropback should be 0.03, but it's actually 0.43 in these games, which is like crazy to think about how many points he's adding over expectation, you know, even against tough opponents. So I would rank this game number 2, but it's kind of, you know, it's the only one I could make the case for number 1 outside of, you know, the other AFC game.
I agree. So I think, again, like I said before, if you are playing the Saturday-only slate, I think that and you're doing 10 lineups, I think every quarterback you use should be in this game. I have Lamar over Josh Allen personally, but like I agree with what you said about Allen against tough defenses. It's not because I dislike Allen, it's because I love Lamar. Lamar Jackson, since returning from COVID, 12 rushes per game, 94.3 yards per game. He is averaging 27.4 FanDuel points per game, and you're getting that for $8,000. Like, oh, baby. 10 lineups, I go 7 Lamar, 3 Josh Allen. How are you viewing things between the two of those guys?
So, again, I'm going to sound like annoying. I think Lamar's the better play, but that savings really would – I don't have, you know, the roto grinders or any other projections of
They're
popularity.
very similar.
Okay. I think the leverage comes from if there's a significant gap in popularity there. But I do have Lamar number one. His rushing is just, it gives him a floor, but also that huge ceiling. Buffalo's 25th in the league in rushing success rate allowed to quarterbacks. I think there's really no blemishes on Lamar overall.
I think that if you get the read that Josh Allen will be less popular, I'd agree. Like, you can pay up to be contrarian there because the rushing is also key for him. It's kind of like we talked about playing time increases for running backs in the playoffs. It's the same thing with running quarterbacks. So they run more. Like Russ did it last year. Josh Allen did it last week. He ran 11 times last week. That's his most rush attempts in a game since October 25th. As you saw, it's a lot of designed runs and a lot of high leverage design runs. So if you get the read that Lamar will be far more popular, go with Josh Allen. I just don't think that'll happen. So I'll take the savings and go with Lamar Jackson. But they're easily number one and number two. And I think that for the full 4-game slate, they're easily number 2 and number 3 behind just Mahomes for me. Yeah. As far as the other pieces go in this game, I think, the Browns receivers, John Brown, really took an axe to my bankroll last week. So thanks, Smokey. Appreciate it. But it's a revenge game. There we go. 97% snap rate for John Brown last week. Finished with 4 targets. If we look at the full sample here, in the games they've had John Brown healthy with Cole Beasley and Dawson Knox, in that time, Brown has 19% of the overall targets. Beasley's at 17%. Brown is at 24% deep. Beasley's at 17%. Brown, 23% in the red zone. Beasley's at 13%. So I prefer Brown over Beasley. I prefer him over Gabriel Davis as well. I know that Davis played well last week, but he had the same number of targets and about half the snaps of John Brown. So this is a long way of saying I'm going back to John Brown this week. I don't feel great about it, but I kind of got to do it. What's your read here on the pass catchers?
Yeah, I think this is another one of those spots where, well, not another, but just one of those spots where we can probably get a whole lot of leverage by the fact that John Brown let a lot of us down last week, specifically you and I. But did you happen to see the video of Cole Beasley running his routes last week?
I saw him limping after plays.
Well, there was a tweet with a video. I'm sorry, I don't remember who it was, but it was that Cole Beasley ran the same route the whole game. He basically just walked out about 6 yards and turned around.
So he's not fully healthy, is what you're saying?
I don't think so. And anytime we get that read, you and I are very cautious because Cole Beasley also has a lot of reasons to be skeptical of his true high-end ceiling. So if I'm deciding between Cole Beasley and John Brown, it's still going to be John Brown, even though the floor is obviously a 0. But I'm going back to John Brown. And I think Stephon Diggs is obviously a fantastic play. But again, if everyone gets to Devontae, if everyone can play one high-end receiver and they play Devontae, I'm good with Diggs. I think it's just going to be more of a feel-based thing. And I might actually just end up having more Stephon Diggs than Devontae because of how I feel about this game.
I agree. As we talked about before, I think that's the right way. Again, it's nothing to do with Devontae's matchup. It's all about game environment. This one's much better than the Rams versus the Packers. Cole Beasley without John Brown has upside. Cole Beasley with John Brown and banged up, that's tougher. So I think that Brown's the better option here between the two. Dawson Knox is someone that I did use last week just to get the salary savings. He had a touchdown, did nothing else outside of that. He's $5,000, I think, among the lowest salary tight ends, a.k.a. him or Higbee. I probably go Higbee personally. What about you?
Yeah, I have Higbee over him. Higbee is just I think a better bet to run more relevant routes and get some higher leverage looks. I've played a solid amount, honestly, of Dawson Knox, but
yeah, there's just been on enough small slates where it's happened. Yeah.
He's more of a touchdown bet, and that's about it. Higbee, we've at least seen have some yardage upside, break some longer plays, get some, I would imagine, more downfield targets than Dawson Knox, but Don't quote me on that. But I mean,
Dawson Knox actually has had some downfield plays recently.
Yeah, that's true.
He's got 2, he averaged 2 per game the final 4 regular season games, but that was without John Brown for most of those.
So I have it at 0.9.
He had none before that stretch, I will say.
Well,
he had none before that 4-game stretch. He's been healthier, but still, I think that Higbee's better. I will say, though, that Mark Andrews is abundantly easy to get to, and I think that Andrews is my preferred way to play this slate. I think he's easy. Like, he's 66. Marquise Brown is 65, coming off a big game. We know that tight ends tend to shred Buffalo, based on what we saw last week with Jack freaking Doyle going for like 100,000 yards. So I think between Andrews and Brown, I'm going to go back to Andrews over Brown, but I think that I don't think either is a bad play. I think they're actually both really good plays. I just prefer Andrews over Brown by a tiny bit. And Marquise Brown's role last week, phenomenal. That's what we've been waiting for forever. I just think that because Brown had a big week last week, whereas Andrews did not, I think, and Andrews also fills tight end. I'd rather go Andrews over Brown, but I like both quite a bit. What's your read on the Ravens, guys?
Yeah, Andrews is the preference because he does fill tight end. I think if you really needed to, you could just consider Andrews like a receiver. And
would you rank Andrews or Robert Woods higher? Like, probably Andrews, right?
Yeah, maybe, probably. But what I was going to say is we don't ever do this, but I think if you really needed to, and I think this could be a very easy way to differentiate. I know it's bad process long term, but you could flex a tight end if you use Mark Andrews, or I guess he'd be your flex, but play like Robert Tonyan. I understand. Yeah. I understand. But again, let's say you play Tonyan at tight end and you can play Robert Woods or Mark Andrews at flex. I think that kind of combination might be all it takes to differentiate your lineup a lot.
Yeah, I might not get there, but I think your reasoning is sound.
I think that this slate specifically, we're going to see a lot of the same lineups, like very, 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 very close lineups, because I think there's sort of one obvious way to play it.
That's why you play Jared Goff. Sorry. I had something very bad in my throat. Tried to clear it off mic. Couldn't do it. So I came back in. Just whatever. We're going to plow through this. Any final thoughts for you on the Saturday slate?
We just both really like the AFC game. I think we're both good with Gus Edwards as a pivot who might not work out, but
lower exposure pivot, I will say.
Yeah. But yeah, I think look, we know where the ball's going with this AFC game.
Yep, I agree. So let's move now to the Sunday slate. But first, the NFL playoffs are in full swing, and FanDuel Sportsbook is making sure you have the opportunity to get in on the action with some of the best possible odds on the market. Right now, new users can wager up to $5 on any team to win their divisional or conference championship game at plus 2,500 odds. That is right, a $5 bet on any team to win any game before the Super Bowl can win you $125. Let's say you love the Chiefs, but you don't want to hang the 10. You can just bet them to win outright. $5 at plus 2,500 odds. The divisional round just a couple of days away. So download the FanDuel Sportsbook app and make your first deposit to see the enhanced odds today. Must be 21 plus and present in New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Illinois, Colorado, West Virginia, Tennessee, Iowa, or Indiana. New users only. Must wager on designated boost market. Deposit required. Max bonus is $125. See full terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Colorado, call 1-800-522-4700. In West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. In Indiana, call 1-800-9-WITH-IT, or in Tennessee, call the Tennessee Red Line, 1-800-889-9789. Let's dive in here to the Browns at the Chiefs. The Browns with an impressive showing last week, and now they get to face Patrick Mahomes as their reward for that thumping against the Steelers. The Chiefs are 10-point favorites here. Total is 57.5. That opened at 55.5, but has gone up 2 points. Injuries are noteworthy here because Sammy Watkins was unable to practice Wednesday due to a calf injury. Mitchell Schwartz, also to my massive sadness, was not spotted, so he's unlikely to come back this week. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was limited. He did miss the final 2 games with the hip and ankle injuries, but looks like he should be back here. On the Browns side, no Jack Conklin, hurt his hamstring in their win over Pittsburgh. David Njoku also out, but sounds like Joel Bitonio should be back. Kadero Hodge should be back. Kevin Stefanski is already back. Bill Callahan is back. The Browns are fully loaded, baby. We talked about having this game ranked first overall for the weekend. Tell me why.
The Chiefs. It's the Chiefs. If you look at all 8 offenses, there's one who I feel is locked in to performing, and it's the Chiefs. And that alone is good enough for me to rank this game number 1. And we were talking before the show with like the sort of modeling and predictions we try to do based on the data. I feel like we're both a little higher on Cleveland. The consensus. If you adjust
the betting market, I know that.
But I mean, I think this game could stay closer. I don't think that matters quite as much in the playoffs because it's the playoffs, especially and with the Chiefs, we've seen them just light it up and keep the foot on the pedal. And they should be rested up. They haven't played, so I think that they're going to be locked into 4 quarters, kind of no matter how this game goes. And we also have 3 players who can just completely obliterate a main slate with like 13 games. You put them on a 2-game slate or even, say the 4-game slate. Like this is the number 1 game because of the Chiefs.
Yeah, I agree. I also agree with what you said where we think the Browns can keep pace. If I look at my expected spread for this game at 6.5, that's close enough to keep it close. And I think that's also close enough to expect the Browns offense to be efficient. Like, I don't know how much I believe in this, but like if I look at my projected offensive efficiency numbers, they have the Browns 3rd among all teams playing this weekend behind just the Chiefs and the Bills. So I'm skeptical of that, to be clear, but I think the Browns, their team total at FanDuel Sportsbook is 23.5. I love the over on that number. I don't know if they can cover because this defense is so bad, but I love the over on their team total. And if they score 24 points, we're going to get production somewhere. So I think the Browns will do enough. Let's start things off there because the Chiefs are pretty obvious the way to play things there. The Chiefs defense ranks 15th against the pass, but 29th against the rush. Nick Chubb could be pretty interesting. If we look at him since his snap rate increased, which was, I think, like week 11 or so, he's at 110 yards per game from scrimmage per game in that time, 31% red zone share. Obviously, Kareem Hunt had the touchdowns last week, but that's pretty fluky. And in that wild card game, Nick Chubb, 18 carries and 4 targets. That is 26 adjusted opportunities, which is the most he has had this entire year. So I think the Browns will run the ball. I think they will run the ball efficiently, and I think that Nick Chubb will be the primary benefactor of that. So despite the fact the Browns are 10-point dogs, I think their running back is a really good play. Their running back who doesn't get a lot of work in the passing game is a good play despite a 10-point spread. Am I stupid?
No, I actually went back and looked. This is always a little, whatever. But if you look at since week 11, which is when his snap rate went back to like
60%.
No, since week 10, I have it. Sorry. You said week 11, and I thought that sounded right. So I have a week 10. But whenever they've been trailing by 7 or more, Chubb has 15 carries and 5 targets. Hunt has 7 carries, 8 targets. But that's actually like in line, their percentages of opportunities with what they've done in that sample with a 6-point deficit or, and above, so a lead. So basically, even when they've been trailing, which has been actually rare for them in this sample, we haven't seen Nick Chubb just be completely irrelevant, which is what gives me the most confidence. But I think that people will probably play it if Kareem Hunt, especially against his former team. I think that we could get some maybe a little bit of leverage discount on Chubb. Yeah,
we get the Kareem Hunt revenge game, but not the Mitchell Schwartz revenge game. Just
I don't know if it counts as a revenge game if it was.
No, Mitchell Schwartz is angry he had to win that championship. Just ticked off. He's been the best offensive tackle in football, and he doesn't get to face his old team. Like, there have been rumors he might retire. I hope that does not happen. So Mitchell Schwartz, get healthy, buddy. Get back soon. I want to see you play football again. Please do not retire. So we like Chubb. I think Chubb is – sorry, go ahead. What?
I wasn't talking about Mitchell Schwartz.
I was.
I know. It's just funny. It's funny you think I know anything.
Myles Garrett against Mitchell Schwartz.
It's funny you think I know anything about offensive linemen.
I'm just sad, man. Let me be sad. As far as the passing pieces go for the Browns, if we look at them, I think their most relevant sample is weeks 13, 15, and 18. That may sound weird, but they had that game where everyone was out with COVID. Austin Hooper's missed games, Donovan Peoples-Jones missed time. That's the gains they've had with Austin Hooper since the Odell Beckham injury, since Donovan Peoples-Jones' role went up. And in that time, Jarvis Landry has 27% of the overall targets, 13% deep, but 36% in the red zone. He has $6,900, 72 yards per game in that span. He's fine. I think that Rashard Higgins also fine is the way I'd phrase it. 22% of the overall targets, 56% deep, 14% in the red zone. Austin Hooper, 20% overall, 13% deep, 27% in the red zone. So Hooper at 55, I think definitely does work. And I also think that outside of Travis Kelce, this slate's kind of open at tight end. I would say Hooper is the best pay down option at tight end. I think that Higgins is a really good wide receiver play. And I'm willing to use all those guys. What are your thoughts on the Browns pass catchers?
I said that I'd be okay flexing a tight end on the Saturday.
You want to go Kelce Hooper with a game stack?
I think that is like that. That's going to be all it takes to help differentiate, because I used to look at just cumulative roster rate to see how unique my lineup might be, but people smarter than me said to do it by like product of popularity. So Hooper's going to be fairly unpopular just because Kelsey's on the slate. I know Kelsey's salary is high, but we've seen Travis Kelce be very popular every single week for the most part. So I think that combination is interesting. It's a very easy justification, especially from the game stack perspective. So I'm in on that, but I'm also good with Jarvis. I'm good with Higgins. So I think we have three viable bring back stacks with the Chiefs. I would prefer to get to Jarvis, but I think you and I are big on Higgins as well.
I think with Higgins, like he's at 66.3 yards per game and he's $5,300. I think that Higgins, if you need help getting to Mahomes, Hill, Kelce, he helps quite a bit. I'd rather flex him than Hooper, but I think from a game theory perspective, what you're saying makes sense. So I'm not going to push back on it. I just prefer Higgins if choosing between the two. And also the Browns have been throwing a bit more recently. They've had two back-to-back must-win games. 55.3% early down first half pass rate in those games. And that's with all their wide receivers healthy. I think that's noteworthy that they've been a little bit more pass heavy. So that's a boost for Higgins. I don't think that hurts Chubb in any way, because I'm not going there for volume. I'm going there for efficiency regardless. So Higgins definitely does work. Let's go to the Chiefs here. Actually, any Kareem Hunt for you or no?
Yeah, just because it's such a small slate, I can't say that I wouldn't play any, but that's more of a he's not going to be someone I prioritize.
I would rather use Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So let's shift here to the Chiefs. Edwards-Helaire coming off an injury, but the Browns 29th against the pass, 19th against the rush. They're just beatable. If you look at CEH before the injury in Week 14, he played 74% of the snaps, 16 carries and 6 targets. Before he got hurt in Week 15, he had 14 carries and 2 targets. Last year, Damian Williams became a featured back for the Chiefs in the playoffs. I am skeptical if that'll happen with CEH because he's coming off an injury. They signed Le'Veon Bell for a reason. They've used Darrell Williams for a reason. They don't think that CEH is worth featuring right now. However, he's $6,100. I think there is a path to him being a featured back. So I'm okay using him. Looking at the Roto-Grinders popularity projections, a little higher than I would have hoped. So I think it's possible I wind up being underweight on him, but I'm willing to use him. What are your thoughts on CEH specifically?
I haven't looked into him too much just because I almost see this one playing out where I try to get Camara and Chubb into most of my lineups and maybe not play a third running back, depending on how the Tampa Bay situation shakes out. I think that's the way that I've been trying to play it primarily. But, you make a good case for Edwards-Helaire to be more featured, but you also make the good case where he might not be more featured. We haven't really seen them commit to him. And his big concern has been pass protection. That doesn't necessarily help you earn more high leverage, snaps.
Well, especially if you're facing, Myles Garrett with no Mitchell Schwartz. Like that's a factor to consider for sure.
So I think Edwards-Helaire is he's obviously the preference in the backfield. Like, I'm not trying to say maybe play someone else. No Le'Veon for me, but
you're saying you would rather go receiver over CEH, and I think that I'd agree with that assessment. I think that's a very fair assessment.
I think I'm there. Yes, you can make this. We made the same argument. The range of outcomes, the floor for Singletary on the Saturday slate compared to even the floor for receivers on the Sunday slate, and we just use Edwards-Helaire. Same argument, but I think game theory comes into play, and I think there are reasons to be a little bit hesitant to think that Edwards-Helaire just soaks up a huge role in the playoffs.
Agreed. So he's an option for me, and based on the projected popularity, I might be underweight, but I'm going to use him just because I think that there's a path to him being more featured. So Sammy Watkins didn't practice on Wednesday. If we look at the games with Watkins out, Tyreek Hill had 28% of the team's targets, 37% deep, and 36% in the red zone. So we were talking about Diggs and Devontae on Saturday. I think for the 4-game slate, I think that Tyreek Hill, I don't want to say he's in a tier of his own. I don't want to say he's a full tier above Devontae and Diggs, but I'd rank him above both personally. How about you relative to those guys specifically?
I think he is probably in his own tier.
Okay, that's fair. I'm not going to push back on you on that.
I think it's close, but I think you can easily just make the case that there's not a whole lot standing in the way for Tyreek to get his, especially with his splits without Sammy Watkins. I was trying to tinker with a Mahomes, Hill, Kelsey lineup for just the 2-game slate. I don't know how that's going to work out, but I imagine not very well.
Yeah, that's where you're definitely flexing. Like you're probably going Hooper and Higgins in that lineup.
Yeah. So if you go those 3, and because you're not going to play the Browns against them, but you just plug in Tampa Bay at 35.
Yeah.
You have to fill out 2 more running backs, 2 receivers, and a flex. You have 6,000 per player.
I can actually make that work.
You can, and I will. I know that.
Yeah.
But again, that speaks to running it back with Austin Hooper, Rashard Higgins. It helps get you there. In that lineup, I'll probably have to go with like a Kareem Hunt as well, depending on how the Tampa Bay situation works out in the backfield.
I think if you use Mahomes, Hill, Kelsey, you are counting on the Browns being relevant, which makes the allure in the bring back options a bit higher there.
Yes.
So you can make that lineup work, and you should. I think you should have a lineup with Mahomes, Hill, and Kelsey. Are you prioritizing Hill or prioritizing Kelsey, all things considered?
I want to say both, but that's not really an answer.
It is kind of an answer.
Okay, I would say both, but if I had to pick one, it's going to be Kelsey, just from an opportunity cost standpoint alone. Yes, Tyreek Hill can obviously put up an absurd game, but we do have other receivers, and the way that receiver works is, a healthy Michael Thomas can be the wide receiver 1 on this slate, like a healthy Mike Evans. Like that's how it can work. But I don't really know how frequently Travis Kelce's not going to be the tight end 1. I actually should have numbers on it, but I don't have them pulled up right this second.
Kelsey's game logs are the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Like, he's insane. He's so good. I know, breaking news, Travis Kelce is good. What about the ancillary jabronis here? Shout out to Rich Rebar on the Roto Grinders Pick 6 show. Any interest in Demarcus Robinson, Mecole Hardman? If Sammy plays, would you go with him, or are we getting our value elsewhere?
I think it's just like if you have to. I don't. It's they're never anyone I prioritize. I'm still partial to Demarcus Robinson because everyone hates him and loves Mecole Hardman.
I hate him because he's not very good at football. Snaps as a result.
But we have seen his role get better without Sammy as opposed to Hardman. So
yeah, but it got worse as the season went along because he kept making mistakes, and that lost him snaps.
But I think Mecole Hardman's role is always overstated because people want him to be.
I 100% agree there. I just don't think that puts me on DeMarcus.
No, look, I said I'm not on any of these guys. They're more like if you like
if you're picking one where you need to use one of them, you've already used Rashard Higgins, so you can't go him. You're going DeMarcus over Mecole?
Probably not.
Okay. That's what I wanted to hear. Let's move now. Any final thoughts for you in this game?
I have Kelsey at about 75% likely to lead the slate at tight end, which is not a surprise, but like
Right.
that's what we're dealing with.
Huge.
That's what we're dealing with.
Yeah. So I think that your ranking of Kelsey over Hill is fair. I might go Hill, but it's hard. It's hard not to go with Kelsey. Let's go to Tampa Bay at New Orleans. The Saints are 3-point favorites here. Total is 52. That opened at 50, so it's gone up. Injuries here. Ronald Jones didn't practice Wednesday due to his quad injury that came up out of nowhere. Bruce Arians did say, though, that he expected Jones to practice Thursday. Doesn't mean he's locked to play. He could be a full practice and not be a lock to play, apparently. I think he got hurt pregame, so I should stop tilting, but I'm still mad about it. It was really bad financially that happened.
I thought you were past it. I didn't notice anything.
Not past it. Latavius Murray and Taysom Hill did not practice Wednesday. Latavius has a quad injury. Hill has a knee injury. I think that there's more concern around Latavius playing than Taysom Hill. Traquan was limited in practice. Looks like he'll be back out there. So some questions around Latavius and Taysom. It looks like Traquan should be back. Question marks around Ronald Jones. What are you seeing in this game overall?
Well, this is the only matchup where we have past games already from this season. The first two matchups were very good for the Saints. A 34-23 win for the Saints in week 1, and then a 38-3 win in week 9 in Tampa Bay. That's hard to shake because I think the Saints are really good, and I'm not completely sold on the Buccaneers, despite having bet them to win. I want them to win the Super Bowl. It would be good for me, but I really like the Saints. I'm a little bit more hesitant, for the Buccaneers. We saw Brady be really bad in these two games against the Saints, negative 0.31 passing net expected points per drop back. He hasn't been particularly good against top 12 pass defenses. He has 6 games there. 251 yards per game, 1.8 touchdowns for 17.3 FanDuel points per game, but the efficiency is just 0.05 passing net expected points per dropback, which is pretty much what you'd expect for the most part. So, not his full season hasn't been with Antonio Brown, hasn't been quite what it is now, but I think there are reasons to be a little bit concerned, and that's why, the NFC games are just not as appealing to me as the AFC games.
That's why I'm ranking it below Bills Ravens. I do think that the Bucs, I'm not worried about their splits against the Saints because one of those is week 1. I think Mike Evans is banged up going into that one, if I recall correctly. And then in week 9, that was their first game with Antonio Brown. And it was also a Sleepy Tom game because it was a primetime game. So clearly, this one's at 6:40, which means he won't fall asleep till halftime.
Yeah.
We'll get one good half of Tom Brady, and then he'll fall asleep.
Although last week, tough matchup
okay, so
at night.
Relating to that, I think that game is why I have more optimism about the Bugs. Oh gosh, that game is why I have more optimism about the Bucs than I would have previously because I was worried about them in that game because Washington generates a pass rush that has been the bugaboo for the Bucs this year. They're a good defense. They did well there. Tom Brady 0.42 passing net expected points per dropback in that game. That was really impressive. So that upped my view of this Bucs team, and it allows me to throw out both the first 2 games against the Saints. So if I'm looking at the Sunday only slate, I'm not going Mahomes. I think that Tom Brady's number 2 ahead of Drew Brees. He's $7,700. That makes it easier to get to Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. I think that if you go Brady, I would try to get to Hill and Kelce because then you're soaking up almost all of the Mahomes production by using those 2 guys. So I think that's one way to do so. I think that Mahomes is several tiers above Tom Brady, despite that, but that's what I would throw out there.
So based on how you phrased that, do you have Brees over Baker?
Publicly or privately?
Because I have Brees 4th on this slate.
I mean, I have Baker over Brady privately, but
wait.
I mean, I love Baker.
Wait. Just let's simplify this. Rank the 4 quarterbacks.
Mahomes, Brady, Baker, Brees.
Okay. Because that's what I have.
Yeah.
I just thought maybe you had Brees over Baker.
I think Brees is at least worth considering. I I might wind up going Brees third over Baker by the time we get to this weekend.
Sure. I just don't. I haven't played Drew Brees in like years, basically, because the ceiling is not. It's just not there. We've seen Baker have, whether from positive or negative script, like play well. He's been pretty good. We didn't really talk about him, but we've seen ceiling from him. So I have Brady second, but the reason I asked is you said maybe Brady over Brees, but I have Baker over Brees as well.
I will say the upside discussion around Brees is changing because if you look at him since he returned, he's at 0.28 passing net expected points per dropback. His average depth of target is 6.9, which it's not good. However, it's 1.5 yards higher than it was when he got hurt.
Yeah, but that's still bad. It's a full yard off the league average.
I know, but it's a 4-game slate, and like Taysom Hill is banged up. Like, part of the reason he doesn't have upside is because Taysom Hill takes away touchdowns. But, like, I could, like, if I told you right now that Drew Brees threw 4 touchdown passes on Sunday, would you be floored? Would your mouth drop open?
No. If Drew Brees throws for 4 touchdowns and gets 22 FanDuel points, would you be surprised?
He pulls a Russ, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, but, like, you know.
Right.
That's why, like, I might not use Drew Brees, but I think it's defensible to rank him above Baker.
It's defensible, but I don't have it ranked that way. So
okay, fair. I'm not going to push back on that. I think that's totally fine. Other pieces in this game besides the quarterbacks, Camara, he's $9,000. Last week, he had 23 carries and 2 targets, 116 yards from scrimmage, a 44% red zone share. He didn't get the playoff snap rate bump, but he got the playoff usage bump in that game. The targets weren't there, but the carries were. Now Latavius is banged up. I think Camara, despite the matchup, is he just someone you put in and kind of build from there? Or do you think there's a case to be lower on him?
I don't think there's a case to be lower on him. The real case to be lower on him, which I know how that sounds now, but looking just at running back, there's no case I can make to be low on him in favor of anybody else. But if I want to play Mahomes, Hill, and Kelsey, that's the case to be low on Camara because you can't play him then. Mm-hmm. But we've seen 24.5 adjusted opportunities in the 2 games against Tampa Bay, which you can throw out if you want. But I think with Tampa Bay's front being what it is, it's at least engaging to see how he performed in those 2 games.
I think he had 7 targets per game in those 2.
7 targets per game, 21% target share. I think that actually led the team in those 2 games.
Yeah. I would say if you can do this, which I know you can because you're very smart, I would probably look at the first game as a whole, week 1, and then the first half of week 9, because the Saints basically pulled a lot of dudes in the second half because they were up so big.
Sure.
But I think your overall point is Camara is fine despite the matchup. I wholeheartedly agree.
I also am never going to put a ton of stock into a 6-quarter sample, though. So,
nor should you. Agreed. Looking at the pass catchers here, Michael Thomas, $7,200. It was weird last week to see Deontay Harris get all those targets because he played, I think, like 29. He played 29% of the snaps. I have no interest in using Deontay Harris this week. I know Bruce Arians specifically said he's worried about him because he has so much speed, which Bruce Arians says just the wildest stuff in his pressers. He's a weird dude.
Deontay Harris last week, 24 air yards and 7 targets for a 3.4 yard ADOT, 36% route rate according to Pro Football Focus.
So we can avoid him, right?
I hope people chase it. The 83 yard game. I'm not saying he's a terrible play, but
especially with Traquan coming back, there's a chance his roll goes down.
His roll from 36%.
Yeah. So I'm okay avoiding him personally. I think Manny is like a tough sell too. He's at 11% target share in games with Thomas and Brees, 23% in the red zones. Like he can score a touchdown, but I don't think there is a path to me regretting not using Emmanuel Sanders.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not particularly trying to play Manny, but if I have to plug in Manny to make a lineup work, I'm okay. So I'm not. We say this sometimes on the golf podcast. He's not someone I'm talking anyone into, but I'm also not necessarily talking someone out of. I would lean more toward talking someone out of playing Manny, but it's a 2-game slate. There's
right.
And he's got to roll. He's going to run routes. With that much we can say. So there's that angle.
Okay, let's talk about the Buccaneers running back situation. We don't know yet if Ronald Jones will play. It sounds like he's going to practice. So the most likely scenario is that Ronald Jones plays. Let's talk about what happens if he does not, though. Leonard Fournette, $6,300 in games with no Ronald Jones. He's at 88 yards per game, 38% red zone share. I think that Leonard Fournette would be a tremendous play once again if Ronald Jones cannot go. Would you agree with that? Because I don't think that's outrageous by any means or bold.
Yeah, if Jones is out, very good with Fournette. I said I would probably try to prioritize Camara and Chubb. I realize how hard that is to do now because I'm not going to play Hill and Kelsey in every lineup together, but
right.
I want some value. If Fournette goes without Jones, I much prefer him to Kareem Hunt or Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and I will not be alone in that. I know that, but
I agree.
That's okay.
So I'm hoping we get clarity. The odds are that we probably will not. Like, this is the way it'll go down. Ronald Jones will be limited on Thursday, limited on Friday. He will be questionable. We will not get a tweet from Adam Schefter at 11:48 on Saturday night telling us whether or not he'll play. That's how it will go down. We're going to go into lock on Sunday not knowing if Ronald Jones will play. I guarantee you that's going to happen. How do you play things in that scenario?
I would still prioritize Fournette then, because if Jones is limited, there's no reason to think that Jones will handle like a full workload. And I would bank on Fournette having just more work than Jones in that scenario. So I'm okay sticking with Fournette. That's how I'd play it.
But would you rank him higher than Clyde Edwards-Helaire there?
Oh,
because I'd go CEH personally.
Yeah, then
if there's ambiguity around Rojo.
Yeah. Although, last week you said you were factoring in the 30% chance that Fournette would be inactive, which I know everything changed, but
yeah,
it's hard for me sometimes to grasp what exactly you're asking me.
Fair.
So
fair.
If we don't know before lock if Jones is going to play, I would put Edwards-Helaire over Fournette. If I have to play one of Jones or Fournette, not knowing what's going to happen, or sorry, if we know that Jones is going to play, I would still prefer Fournette.
I would just avoid both. I know that that's different than what you said, but I would avoid both. If they're both going to play, I don't really want to go there. The wide receivers here, Mike Evans is $7,100. He has very troubling splits against New Orleans, which is relevant because Marshawn Lattimore is still there. With that said, Marshawn Lattimore's coverage grades at Pro Football Focus are declining from where they have been previously. Mike Evans has a tremendous role right now. He has 100-plus yards in 3 straight fully healthy games. I think that Evans, I'm assuming that he will be less popular than he should as a result of his splits against the Saints. So I want to actively be overweight on Mike Evans. How are you viewing the pass catchers here?
Yeah, I like Evans. The only thing that worries me, and I know how the second game went here, but they were really flat market shares. Even if you adjust for the games that these guys have played against the Saints. So it's hard to get a read of what they actually want to do. They might want to spread the ball around, and that's problematic. But if I have to play one, it's going to be Evans, just for the downfield work, the yardage upside, and the salary being very, very, reasonable.
Chris Godwin is $7,500. What is your level of interest in him?
I would say lower than on Michael Thomas. So it's hard to. What's that?
Yes.
So it's harder. It's hard to say that I'm going to play a ton of Chris Godwin, but pivoting from Evans to Godwin, if you have the salary to do it, could help if it turns out that Evans is more popular. I just don't. He's not going to be someone I prioritize. And if I'm playing a receiver in the 7,000 range, it's going to be Thomas.
I wholeheartedly agree there. The one argument in favor of Chris Godwin is if you look back at the first half of that second Saints game, it's week 9 when Antonio Brown is playing. So we're looking at 2 quarters now, Brandon, not 6. In those 2 quarters, Godwin led with 5 targets. Gronk had 4. Antonio Brown had 4. Mike Evans had 1. Mike Evans still almost had more receiving yards than the rest of them because he's better at football. And Godwin had 76 air yards. Brown had 90. Evans had 12. So I think that's an argument for Godwin. That's not going to get me to use him more. But like, if you wanted to justify using Godwin, eat your heart out, go ahead. I think that's the way you do so. I personally, though, would still rank Evans higher. Not really interested in Antonio Brown. I think that his upside kind of sucks. So like, he's probably going to be popular because he is low salaried exposure to this game. But like, it's tough for me to get there at 64 for him when I could pay 700 more and get to Evans.
I don't think you can just throw around 700. That
I know, but like, there's a big gap in production between those two.
Oh yes,
yeah.
I'm not going to be able to do this in time, but that doesn't work either with Tyreek. So I was just going to give you like an either or, but
it would be Camara and Brown versus Evans and Chubb. Like there, you probably do lean Camara and Brown, but like I think I'd try to negotiate elsewhere.
But Kamara's only 800 more than Chubb, so
get out of here. Who invited you to this podcast?
I don't know.
Any final thoughts for you on this game?
We should talk probably tight ends quickly.
Sure, go ahead.
Just because we talked about Kelsey and Hooper, I would be fine, honestly, with Gronkowski. I would be fine enough with Jared Cook. But that's more of a you're playing where this game is the better game of the Chiefs game, which I wouldn't do very frequently. But I think both of those tight ends are viable. And even if I play Kelsey, I would still be open to flexing one of those two, even if it's not my preference. Like I would rather play Higgins or probably even Manny.
Yeah.
But it is something that I would consider. So do you have like interest in the tight ends, or is it more of a?
So my arch nemesis, Cameron Breit, is not the worst play in the world, is the way that I would phrase that. His snap rate's been up. He's been running more routes recently. He actually showed yardage upside last week, which is why he's my arch nemesis, because he usually does not have that. So I would rather get to Hooper. Okay, so if the question is Mike Evans and Cameron Breit versus Antonio Brown and Austin Hooper, I'm going to go Mike Evans, Cameron Breit. There's one. There. How about that?
There you go. Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah. I'm good with that. I mean, 51% route rate last week. One downfield target, one in the red zone. You could do a lot worse at tight end. And in the event that Kelsey is like
pedestrian,
if he puts up like 12 points, which is so hard to even like think about with his role, he really has to put up a good game to be worth like, what is it, 3,000 more, 2,900 more than every other tight end. So I think in that scenario, Breit has gives you a lot of leverage.
I do think that Jared Cook's salary is low enough where I will finally be back in on him. I have not been able to use Jared Cook in a while because his salary's been outrageous. But $5,600, would you go Cook or Gronk if you had to pick one?
Probably Cook.
I agree. They both get high leverage looks, so I'm not opposed to either. I just think I'd prefer Cook by a tiny bit, personally.
Yeah, it's tough because even with Kelsey, like tight end on Sunday is way better than on Saturday.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. Any final thoughts for you on this game and this slate and this weekend?
Look, I wasn't always like super direct with my reasoning for my preferences for this week, but it comes down to either a 2-game slate or a 4-game slate. Although there is a 3-game slate with the Saturday night game and the 2 Sunday games, which is interesting. But I think Game 3 comes into play here a lot, and you can kind of spin almost any scenario. If you're being realistic with yourself, I wouldn't spin any scenario where like Marquez Valdez-Scantling puts up 300 yards. That's not what I'm talking about. But median value is going to get you on Devin Singletary, but Gus Edwards is probably not that much worse of a play in a big tournament. So,
yeah. Think through those things, think through situations, think through paths and way games can play out. Go from there. Also rank the games, manually rank the games, because that will go a long way towards deciding how you want to rank the players within them. That is all the time that we have for today. Once again, though, we are back with you on Friday, 3:30 p.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Periscope pages, breaking down each game, talking about our favorite bets for this weekend with myself, Brandon, and JJ Zacharyson, and letting you know how we are viewing things for this week. Make sure you're subscribed there, but also make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Not only do we have NFL, not only do we have PGA, not only do we have NBA, not only do we have NHL, but we have UFC as well with Austin Swaim. So we got NBA and NHL with Tom Vecchio, UFC back this week with Austin Swaim. Should be up probably tomorrow morning, I would guess. So make sure you're subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, 16 different sports, rounding up a bit, across all of those feeds. Make sure to subscribe, and if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gdula13, GDULA13.
And I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you with your DFS lineups and your bets for this weekend. We'll talk to you once again next week for the conference championships. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast, powered by numberFire.